our next speaker, we are going to continue with the subject of art. But before that, don't forget to write down your questions, be concise, write to whom you are addressing the questions, hand it to the volunteers or at the registration desk. We will have the first Q&A session right after lunch. So, let me introduce you now to Julio Carvalho, who will talk about poetry by the spirits. Julio Carvalho first encountered the Spiritist doctrine when he was about 14 years old. Since then, he has become an active member, participant in the United States Spiritist movement. He has co-founded the Spiritist Center, Divine Light in Newark, New Jersey, which he coordinates with a group of friends, and has become a prolific speaker, disseminating the Spiritist message not only in the tri-state area, but also in the Union County Jail in New Jersey, where he works as a mental health counselor. Also the husband of my co-MC, Ligia. Oh, Julio. Julio, thank you.
I couldn't start this talk differently without claiming my immense joy for the Spiritist family growing as it is. I am so happy to see all you here, and I wish peace to all of our hearts. Jodie Foster, the Academy Award winner, played an atheist scientist in a movie called Contact. In this movie, she demonstrates to be very passionate about her work because she believes there are many civilizations out in our universe. If our sun is followed by 8 planets, being just one star amongst 100 billion stars, and our galaxy being compared so small to the 300 billion galaxies in our universe, life on other planets must exist. And she finally made a contact with an alien civilization. They sent her a message, and this message was written in the law of mathematics. So they had to make a decision. Who will go to represent humanity to an alien civilization? And she argued it must be a scientist, because the language that we have received is in the language of science, mathematics. And indeed, after a failed attempt, they built a second machine and they sent her. And because of the law of relativity, discovered by Albert Einstein, she spent 1 second falling through the machine, but actually 18 hours out in space. She fell into a wormhole, and that wormhole brought her to a star, to Vega. She also saw different systems of stars with other planets. And while she was contemplating all that beauty with unspeakable awe, she finally concluded they had to send a poet, not a scientist. Why? Because when you read a word in the English dictionary, it gives you the definition of the word, but it doesn't represent what the word means to all of us. That's the job of poetry. And poetry has been representing our emotions, our feelings from the beginning of civilization. Therefore, it's only natural that we see in the Revue Spiritiste, in the Spiritist Revue de Allan Kardec, the poets expressing themselves about this immortality, about eternity. The reason why they write in the Spiritist Review is to show the difference of thinking before and after death. There are many poems, many poets, but due to time constraints, we'll mention just one poet, Alfred de Musset, a famous playwright in the French country back in the 1800s. This man shows clearly his change of heart before and after this incarnation. So, to help you compare the two poems, I will first say one of the poems that he wrote while he was in the flesh. Mind you that he was a very pessimistic man because his perception about life was very gloom. Therefore, one can only write what we perceive and express what we feel. If our thoughts are negative in nature, so will be our feelings, our emotions, our actions, our habits, and our character. Since it's a collection of our habits, it will create a very miserable destiny. And unfortunately, Alfred de Musset had a miserable destiny while he was alive. But this poem was originally written in French. But the beauty of a poem is not just the message, it is also the rhyme. So when you translate a poem, you cannot translate word by word. It must be an adaptation to the language. And we have adapted this very gloomy and depressed poem to the English language, entitled Sorrow. The title itself, it's already very depressing. I lost my strength and my life, my friends and my happiness. I even lost my boastfulness in my genius that was right. When I met the truth, I thought she was my friend. Understanding, feeling it meant I already disgusted the proof. Although the truth has existed forever, those who didn't live it ever ignored what to be applied. God speaks, and we must answer him. In this world, my only joy have been to have sometimes cried. Indeed, very sad, don't you agree? He's saying when he contemplated the truth, it already made him very gloomy. He became depressed after knowing what life is all about. And unfortunately, if we live in a materialistic society, it's impossible not to have a different perception. And that perception does not explain the difficulties. It doesn't explain why we have challenges in life. This is why suicide rates today are higher than ever. Here in this beloved country, 39,000 people kill themselves yearly. And you would think that those who consider having money equals happiness, only poor people kill themselves. But that's not what the data shows. It's something very differently. The rich people will kill themselves way more than poor people. Why? Nothing against the richest. It's for the simple fact that we want money to fulfill three basic needs. The need to reproduce, that's sex, the need to eat, and the need to sleep. But if you're rich, you want to do those three things in a very fancy way. You want to sleep, not just at any place, in a mansion. You want to have sex, not just with one partner, many of them. And you want to eat in fancy restaurants. Therefore, when we look at different animals in nature, a dog, a cat, a mouse, they are fulfilling those three basic instincts. But are we dogs, cats, and mouses? I know you know some people who behave like that. But we are not. We are human beings full of potential, and yet we settle to live a life of a dog, cat, or mouse. That difference right there, for settling for solace, create an existential void. And that void we try to fulfill with food, drugs, and eventually, because those chemicals cannot fulfill that existential void, the hole keeps getting bigger and bigger until the person actually kills themselves. And indeed, Oscar de Busset committed suicide, not with a gun, not by hanging, but slowly but constantly through many different substances because of his perception. But then he went to the spiritual world. There is no hurry to convince others about the spiritual world. That is one thing that would happen to all of us. We all go to the spiritual world. Just don't believe that that day of departure have a contract with old age. We live our lives always thinking that we're going to die when we're 95. And that's not true at all. There's only one condition for us to die. And that condition is we need to be in the body right now. And that day could be tomorrow. As a matter of fact, there were two friends who loved baseball more than anything else. They watched the games, they read all the books, they ate baseball, they slept baseball. They were Yankee fans. And one day the other said, listen, if you die first, now that we are spiritists, can you come back through a medium and let me know if there's baseball in heaven? Because heaven without baseball cannot be a paradise. It's a done deal. 5 years, one of the friends died, and he anxiously waited for communication. He went to all the different Spiritist centers in the tri-state area. Went to Florida, Connecticut, everywhere. And finally, his friend communicated through him. He said, I have two news for you. Which one you want to hear, the good one or the bad one? Well, let me have the good one. Well, there is baseball in heaven. Oh boy, that brings me such a joy. What other news can make me sad now? He said, you are scheduled for tomorrow's game. Oscar de Busset arrives on the other plane of life, and now he changes his perception. He understands the goal of life. We were all born with a mission, and that mission is to empower ourselves intellectually to better ourselves morally. If we're not fulfilling those two basic needs as a spiritual entity, it's impossible to experience what we all crave for, peace and happiness. So he studies. He changed his thought, which changed his emotions. And of course, he changed his way of expressing himself. And after a couple of years, he writes through one of the mediums, and Allan Kardec published that poem in the Revue Spiritiste in the year 1963. But this poem now is much different, because this is a poem entitled Peace. And the poem says, if on earth you're miserable, poor afflicted heart, if for you the unbearable cannot be set apart, contemplate your pain as a path of transformation. Your tears will not be in vain. You will create a better destination. Your moral debt is painful and precise, because your heart forgets evolution has its price. To achieve perfection, work without cease. You will need the introjection of never-ending peace. Life is a journey, and you know the path. Act wisely is worthy. Your bliss will forever last. This is the same poet with a different idea, but maintaining his style of poetry. Therefore, all spirits, through art, through painting, through music, through poetry, has one goal: to help us to better ourselves intellectually and morally. Nothing that is written in Spiritism is for frivolous manner. It must have a goal, and that goal is to transform ourselves. These poems, those songs, these paintings bring us a message that we are immortal and we all have an obligation to fulfill. You are a brick in the building of the universe. And as long as you set that brick down, you're completing your job. And the result of doing that is experiencing peace. But more currently, we have a medium who disincarnated in the year 2002. Someone who is respected throughout the Spiritist movement, not only for his mediumship capabilities, but most importantly, for the amount of time he donated to the law of love. This man published more than 450 works, many writers. It's someone who definitely divided the Spiritist movement before and after him. His name, Francisco Cândido Xavier. Now, how did the highly evolved spirits prepare this individual who will be so important for our movement to start his own movement in the Spiritist doctrine? They started with the book of poems called the Parnassus of Beyond the Grave, Parnaso de Além Túmulo, its title in Portuguese. In this book, there are 56 poets, each one of them writing in their style. Let me remind you that Chico Xavier, when was the instrument of this book, he was only 22 years old. He barely could finish elementary school because he had to take care of his brothers and sisters. He worked every day in a little store throughout many hours of the day, so he had no time to consult works of literacy. But he was the instrument of Castro Alves, Augusto dos Anjos, Casimiro Cunha, people who spoke their works in the Portuguese language throughout many countries. To put into perspective how important this work is, in Brazil, there is an academy called the Brazilian Literary Academy. This academy is composed of 40 writers, people who have contributed to the Portuguese language, so much so that they actually have the power to change the Portuguese language. That academy was inspired in a French academy. 40 writers. If you want to be a member of this academy, you must wait for someone to die to take over their seat. So you are inherited someone's seats. Therefore, when Chico Xavier published this work through the Brazilian Spiritist Federation, these scholars, they had the obligation to study this book. They had to consult this book. And they all were mesmerized. How can this individual who barely finished elementary school can write poems on the same style of dead poets with new content? How could this be? And one of the most beloved writers in the Portuguese culture, Monteiro Lobato, analyzing this book, he said, after reading all these poems, we must give not only one chair of the Brazilian Literary Academy to Chico Xavier, but we have to give him many chairs at the same time. Not only he deserves one of our seats, he deserved the seat of the president. That's how deep and profound each of these poems are. Well, Due to their arrogance and pride, they couldn't give Chico Xavier the seat of the president because them worked so hard to deserve one of those seats. So they had to conclude, these are indeed spirits communicating through this man. Either we give him the chair of the president, or spirits are communicating through him. So they concluded spirits were communicating through Chico Xavier. One of these poets in Parnassus of Beyond the Grave, Castro Alves, when he was alive, he was only 24 years old when he died. And he used to write poems about the freedom that slaves deserve. He became known. He actually had one of the seat in this academy, 24 years old. I don't know about you, but when I was 24 years old, the only seat I had was my house. And this man comes back through Chico Xavier to write a poem that repeats the message of all highly evolved spirits, the message of progress, helping us understand the purpose of pain, explaining that we must have endurance because the challenges we face, they are chosen by our own hands. When we are in the spiritual plane, we look at our past, we make analysis of our thoughts, and we see that we have misused our free will. Instead of choosing love, we chose selfishness. Instead of choosing humbleness, we picked pride. And the result of that, we created many pain to others, which resulted pain to ourselves. Therefore, we don't ask to be born, we beg to be born. Full of challenges and problems. So tonight, hug your mother-in-law. You beg for her presence in your life. She's an instrument to your evolution. That's what we see in the 7th part of the conclusion of the Spirit's book. By understanding these concepts, Spiritism will give us tolerance towards our neighbor, why we should comprehend everyone, why we should not be afraid of death, and most importantly, why we should resist all of our pain, why we should overcome with resilience and confidence in God, because everything that happens to us, it's always for our own good. Each pain will give us an opportunity to evolve a step further in the scale of evolution. That's what Alfred de Musset said on his poem After This Incarnation, and this is what Castro Alves repeats in his poem entitled March On. What does the title represent? March on. No matter what, move forward. Progress, evolution. You are capable. It's within you to evolve. So in this poem, he synthesizes the Spiritist codification, the trials we must overcome, and the purpose of life. When he says, life is full of mysteries, encompassed of laws of beauty, which compels us to evolve. From God we emanate, multiple forms reincarnate, longing for perfection and love. In humanity we seek the truth from many myths, yearning for peace and evolution. We cause in our path multiple lives and deaths, victims of our own disillusion. From the eternal struggle, building ourselves from the rubble, we learn ways to overcome. Despite the pain and misery, nevertheless we grow ceaselessly from darkness to dawn. From the raindrop, a plant reached the top, triumphant at last. The root appears to be gloom. Manure converts to perfume, transmutation at its best. The plant will be crowned with flowers all around, birds' opera on their arrival. But flowers too shall pass. Their martyrdom is a blast for the ground's revival. From nature, we are taught, work hard, that's the law. All life is in movement. Sculpting through sacrifices will carve blocks of vices. Inside a stone lies a monument. Lessons from suffering and pain. Change will always reign, even narrows, tyrants without seas, under the law of reincarnation, through many trials and expiations, they too will be messengers of peace. Let no one be idle. Today's angel was yesterday's Adam. Perfection is everyone's destiny. Life's purpose, splendid. God's love, transcendent. Our school, universe is eternity. On earth, from time to time, sublime beacons of light dissipates the shadows away. Their presence are felt, forever in us they dwell, transforming night into day. Never in history a sacrifice such as the one portrayed by Christ transpire for the sake of truth. From the cross the message is heard, forgive all, always serve, your pain I will soothe. It's Socrates and the hemlock. It's Caesar's war being fought, inflaming oppression and cruelty. It's Selena, his art, the imperialism of Bonaparte, spreading domination and tyranny. It's Dr. King's I Have a Dream, Lincoln's speeches never seen, the incarnation of renovators. It's the embodiment of humility from the charitable Francis of Assisi, the gospel resuscitator. Blessed be the teachers who illuminate the seekers, inspiring virtues and light. Bliss is yours to conquer, although perfection is yonder, your progress is bright. In the entire universe, divine celestial verses decree, march on. A celestial love awaits. Have hope, have faith towards the infinite to come. Thank you, speakers, for allowing me to be one member of this great team. Thank you, God, for the blessing of speaking, and to you all, thank you for listening.